The numbers came in fast. 340 fold space signatures, all hegemony military grade. The automated alert system on the Resolute flagged them twice, as if it didn't trust its own output. Yara read the numbers off her sensor board, sat with them for 2 seconds, then slid the data to Commander Briggs without a word. Briggs read it, put the pad down, and walked to the command chair where Captain Doran Voss was already awake, already watching the main display. The hegemony ships were finishing their fold space exit in tight formation. Long, dark hulls sliding into the Vera corridor in measured rows, dreadnoughts at the front, carrier groups layered behind them, destroyer screens on the flanks. It took years of drilling the same maneuver to move that many ships that cleanly. "Count confirmed?" Voss asked. 340, Briggs said. "Dreadnoughts in the lead line. Carrier complement puts fighters around 1,200 total. Destroyer screens on both flanks." Voss nodded once, not surprised, not worried, the nod of a man checking off something he expected. 42 human ships held position across the corridor from the incoming fleet. None of them moved. None of them had orders to move yet. On the hegemony flagship, Fleet Lord Kareth stood at the forward console and looked at the human formation with mild interest. He had reviewed the numbers before leaving hegemony space. 42 against 340. He had been on the better side of worse odds. He already knew how this ended. His communications officer opened a broadband channel on every frequency. Kareth spoke in the common trade language. No point using hegemony dialect if the other side couldn't follow it. "You are outnumbered by a factor of 8. Your fleet tonnage is less than 12% of ours. Your longest-range weapons cannot reach our rear line before our front line destroys you." A short pause. "Surrender now. Your ships and crews will be taken intact. Resist and there is nothing left to take. You have 10 minutes. The channel closed. On the Resolute's bridge, no one moved. Yara looked at Voss. Briggs stood with his arms crossed and his eyes on the floor, thinking. The rest of the crew waited at their stations. Voss wasn't looking at the hegemony fleet. He was watching a small countdown timer in the corner of his personal console. He had set it 48 hours ago, the moment the first fold space signatures appeared at the outer edge of the relay network. Ships beginning their approach burned from hundreds of millions of kilometers away. Faint traces, but there. He had known they were coming before they arrived. He hadn't told the crew. There was nothing useful for them to do with that information until right now. He filed his morning report. He walked the ship and said good morning to people by name. None of them had any idea what the day was going to look like by the end of it. The timer had less than 3 minutes left. He stood up. "Yara," he said. She looked at him. "Arm the fleet." Her hands moved before he finished the sentence. The signal went out encrypted, ship to ship, reaching all 41 other vessels in under a second. 42 human ships powered up weapons at the same moment. Energy readings spiked on every sensor board in the hegemony fleet. On Kareth's bridge, his tactical officer read the weapons lock out loud. Kareth looked at the display for a moment. Then he laughed. The way you laugh when something brave and pointless happens at the same time. He had seen this before. Species that refused to accept the numbers. They always came around. He opened the channel again. "You have armed your weapons," he said. "I respect the gesture, but you must understand what you are looking at. 340 ships, Captain. There is no outcome here where you win. We are giving you the chance to walk away with your lives. Take it." Silence for several seconds. Then the Resolute's channel opened. Voss's voice came through level and even, no heat in it. "Surrender now." 2 words, same 2 words Kareth had used, said back to him like a number read off a gauge. The silence that followed lasted almost 4 full seconds, which is a long time when 2 fleets are pointing weapons at each other across a corridor. On the hegemony bridge, Sub-Commander Vreth didn't laugh when the others did. He kept his eyes on the sensor display. He had read more human history than anyone else on the ship, not just the battle reports and threat assessments. The actual long record, how humans came through things they had no right surviving. Those two words were sitting wrong with him, and he couldn't say why yet. Kareth leaned toward his transmitter, still smiling. "Captain," he said, "you are either very brave or very confused. Either way, your 10 minutes are running." On the Resolute, Voss checked his timer. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. He sat back down and waited. The laughter on Kareth's bridge ran its course and went quiet. Vreth hadn't joined it. He had been scanning the asteroid belt on the corridor's north side for the past 10 minutes, running a deep band sweep, not because orders told him to, but because the sensor returns from that belt were slightly off. Asteroid fields had background noise. Thermal scatter, small debris, random radio bounce off rock surfaces. This belt had none of that. Too clean. Clean asteroid fields didn't exist in nature. He was still running the scan when Kareth decided to explain the numbers to Voss a second time. Kareth went through them in order. 340 ships versus 42. Dreadnought cannon yield against the maximum output of a human cruiser. Fighter totals. Reload times. Tonnage. He said that even if every human ship fired at once and hit without missing, the damage done would be less than 4% of the hegemony fleet before they were gone. Voss waded through all of it. When Kareth finished, Voss said one thing. "Those aren't the right numbers." Kareth stopped. Voss said he wanted to talk about something that happened 52 years ago. A small automated probe, roughly the size of a household refrigerator, crossed the outer edge of human map space near the Vera Relay Network. Hegemony designed signatures on the shell casing. It spent 3 hours collecting sensor data before the signal went dark. First time hegemony technology had ever entered human map space. The hegemony logged it as a routine low-priority survey pass. No follow-up for 11 years. "You sent it and forgot about it," Voss said. "We found it and didn't." Nobody laughed now. "That probe carried your drive signatures, your sensor frequencies, your power output ratios, and your preferred approach patterns," Voss continued. "We spent 52 years building off that, every year of it." Kareth said the probe data was old. Technology changed. It told humans nothing useful about a fleet built in the last 10 years. Voss agreed that technology changed. He said that after the first probe there were others. Smaller, slower, logged by hegemony long-range arrays as debris or background static. Each one added to what humanity knew. Around 15 years ago, we had enough to start building seriously. Then, "Fleet Lord, you came here because your intelligence said we couldn't mount a credible defense. You've run this same operation 11 times. The others didn't see you coming. We've known you were building this fleet for 6 years. We've known the departure date for 4 months." On the hegemony bridge, Kareth's officers had stopped moving. Vreth put down the scan results and went still. Kareth's voice came back controlled but slower. "Our intelligence was based on 30 years of monitoring your border conflicts," he said. 3 decades of observed behavior. You fought reactively. Your command structures came apart under pressure. Your planning was short-range. Your intelligence was based on what we showed you," Voss said. A pause. "The border skirmishes," Kareth said slowly. "The Harriet Line engagement, the losses at Von Station. You're telling me those were. We showed you what was useful for you to believe. Not all of it was manufactured. The emotion was real. We don't like fighting. But the disorganization, the poor coordination, the reactive command decisions, enough of that was performance. We needed your model of us to be wrong in the right ways." Vreth switched scan types and ran the deep sweep on the far edge of the belt. Still nothing. A section of space that size should have had debris clusters, cold spots, irregular returns. It had none. He switched again. ran a resonance pass to find structures running cold with minimal power. On Voss's console, the countdown timer reached 0. No button pressed, no new order, 2 seconds passed. Then the corridor changed. Cloaking fields across the asteroid belt and along both corridor walls began failing in sequence, not all at once, one after another like a row of doors opening. Each one revealed a platform, then another, then another. 180 of them. Mining platforms, converted over 4 years on slow civilian trajectories, logged in transit records as infrastructure expansion projects. Mass driver arrays bolted to ore extraction frames. Plasma burst emitters fitted into cargo bays, all 180 facing inward. Beyond the belt, fold space readings spiked. Not arrivals, decloaks, ships that had been running dark for over a year. No emissions, no signals, no heat. Admiral Dale's strategic reserve. 220 warships. Jump inhibitor buoys activated at every fold space coordinate in the corridor, every exit point, every emergency window, every pre-mapped escape angle. Sealed. Vreth pulled the new numbers and turned the console to face Kareth without speaking. Kareth looked at the display for a long time. "They were already here when we arrived," Vreth said. Kareth gave the order to fire. 30 years of fleet command, and the first thing he reached for was still aggression. The 42 human ships were right there in range. He ordered the front line to open up. They did. The 42 absorbed the volley and held. Some burned. One frigate on the port edge lost power and began to drift. 3 others showed heavy shield damage, but none broke formation. None scattered. They held their line and returned fire in patterns that looked unstructured. Each shot placed at a specific coordinate on a specific hegemony vessel from a list prepared before the battle started. On the Resolute, Briggs read the damage reports from the forward ships aloud. Flat voice. Voss listened without changing expression. The 42 had been briefed before the fleet left port. Every crew understood the assignment. They were the visible face, the number small enough to invite an attack while the rest of the plan was already in position. Kareth redirected fire to the platforms. The platforms were already shooting. They fired in synchronized sets, not random salvos. Timed impacts designed to hit the same hull coordinate on a capital ship from 3 different directions within half a second. Hegemony shields were built to absorb fire from one vector at a time. 3 simultaneous angles at the same point collapsed the local rating before the distribution system could compensate. A hegemony heavy cruiser took the strike on its port forward section and lost shielding along the entire flank. Dale's fleet came around the belt in loose spread formations. No tight lines, no fixed center. Each ship had a clean angle without clustering into a concentrated target. They hit the rear of the hegemony formation while the front was still adjusting to the platforms. 2 directions of pressure at the same time. A hegemony dreadnought went dark. Kareth called for a tactical summary. 60 ships still combat-capable, 90 partially degraded, the rest holding under fire from multiple directions. Jump corridors locked, no path out. He ordered a breakout. His navigators had found 3 fold space windows near the far end of the corridor, points where the jump inhibitor grid showed slightly weaker readings. He sent 30 ships toward the nearest one at full speed. Voss watched on long-range sensors. "Should we close the net?" Briggs asked. Voss checked the inhibitor grid on his secondary display. The weak points weren't weak points. They had been tuned to look exploitable on a fast scan by someone under pressure. Each node set a fraction lower than the ones around it, just enough to register. Every ship moving toward them was moving away from any viable position. "Let them try," Voss said. The 30 hegemony ships were 2 minutes from jump range when the swarm drones launched. Canisters spread through the belt debris, each drone the size of a fist, nearly invisible on active scan. They moved in assigned groups, each group locked to one ship. They didn't try to punch through shielding. They tracked each target's shield rotation cycle and timed their detonation for the moment a gap opened between layers. The lead destroyer took 11 strikes in 40 seconds. Engines out. It drifted sideways across the path of the ship behind it. The second ship broke hard to avoid collision. A platform volley, calculated for exactly those positions, arrived while they were still tangled. 3 more ships lost propulsion in the next 60 seconds. The 30 became 22. The 22 stopped. A second dreadnought went dark. Vreth stepped forward without waiting to be asked. He kept his voice low enough that only Kareth could hear. The hegemony had studied humanity for 4 decades, he said, built the invasion model on what they found, but what they studied was the emotional record. How humans fought when they were scared or desperate, the border skirmishes, the political crises, the moments where human command looked reactive and short-range. We read their wars, Vreth said. We never read what they did between wars. Kareth said nothing. They didn't build this because something set them off. They saw something small cross their border 50 years ago and decided, quietly between themselves, that if this day ever came they would be ready. That's not reaction. That's patience at a scale we don't have a word for. A third dreadnought went dark on the sensor board. The platforms had gone quiet after the breakout failed. Dale's fleet held the perimeter without pressing in. The human ships weren't attacking. They were just there on every bearing holding position, giving the hegemony fleet nowhere to go without pushing them further. Waiting. Kareth looked at the Resolute's icon on the sensor map. He opened a channel. The battle was over. Nobody had said it. The corridor had a kind of quiet that didn't need anyone to. Hegemony ships that still had engines pulled into a close formation at the center. Not a fighting position. The position you took when the priority had shifted from winning to not losing anyone else. Every commander in that fleet made the same call without coordinating it. Voss noted it. Dale's ships held the perimeter, not advancing, not firing, just present. Kareth did the count himself, pulled the sensor feed, and went through each icon one at a time. 147 hegemony vessels destroyed or dead in space. 68 damaged and stationary. The rest functional but surrounded, no jump window, nothing to gain from moving. His own ship had taken 3 hits, portside shield array down, main cannon at 40%. Engineering said 2 hours to restore partial engine function. In 2 hours, the corridor would still be full of human ships. Captain Kareth said, "I want to ask you something." Voss answered, "Go ahead." "You had this capability for years, the platforms, the reserve fleet, the inhibitors, all of it built and ready." Kareth paused. "Why didn't you use it before now? You could have hit our fleet yards before this fleet was ever assembled. Why wait?" "Because you hadn't attacked us yet." Kareth sat with those 7 words. He had expected something tactical. We waited for the right moment, for the full network to be in position. He had expected an explanation about readiness windows and strategic timing. That wasn't what he got. This was a line humans drew somewhere and held without debating it each time. You didn't hit someone who hadn't hit you, even if you could, even when the window was open. "You spent 52 years preparing," he said. "You had weapons that could have ended us as a military threat before this fleet ever launched, and the only condition you were waiting on was that we hadn't attacked first." "That's correct." On the Resolute, Briggs heard it and felt it differently than he expected. 11 years under Voss. He had signed supply reports for weapons platforms listed as infrastructure maintenance in the official records. He had run training scenarios for situations decades from being real. He understood, practically, that all of it was building towards something. He hadn't thought about the restraint, all those years of capability, sitting still. Every year, the same decision to hold it until someone moved first. Kareth spoke again slower. In our doctrine, a species that builds a force of this scale and doesn't use it is considered irrational. You had every strategic reason to move first. Our analysts would have called the decision not to strike a failure of nerve. What would they call it now? Voss asked. Kareth didn't answer. The border skirmishes, he said instead. The Harriet Line engagement, the losses at Von Station. Your forces took damage in those fights that our analysts used to build their model of how you operated. Reactive command, poor coordination under pressure, short-range planning. I know, Voss said. That was theater. Enough of it was. Kareth looked at his display. He thought about the 11 species before humanity, whether any of them had fought in a way that didn't match their observed history. He couldn't name one. They all fought the way the hegemony expected. That predictability was what made the expansion work. A species behaved the way its record said it would. Humans had given them 30 years of the reactive version, and somewhere else out of view, they had been building something else the whole time. The council sent me here because they ran the numbers and decided you could be taken without significant resistance, Kareth said. Their assessment was based on 30 years of observation. Their assessment was based on 30 years of what we showed them, Voss said. Not the same thing. Vreth had said nothing since the battle went quiet. He stepped forward now and said quietly that the hegemony's model had never come up against a species that managed its visible record so deliberately over such a long stretch of time. We read their conflicts, Vreth said. We never asked what they were doing when they weren't fighting. Kareth looked at the sensor map one more time. I need to discuss terms, he said. Voss waited. My flagship can't move. My fleet is surrounded. I know where this is. A pause. What are you asking for? I'll send you the list, Voss said. The terms arrived on Kareth's console in plain text. No formatting, no header, 3 lines. First, full hegemony withdrawal from all contested border space, effective on signing, with a 60-day hard deadline for all military assets to clear the boundary. Second, release of every human prisoner currently held in hegemony detention, with a full accounting for those who didn't survive. Third, a recorded statement, broadcast on hegemony public frequencies, confirming that the hegemony armada had entered the Vera corridor with the intent to take human space by force, and that this was carried out on orders from the Hegemony Council. Kareth read the first 2 without comment. He read the third one twice. He opened the channel. The council will not accept that, he said. They'll call it coerced, say I was compromised, disavow it. Let them, Voss said, make the recording anyway. You understand what this does to me? Yes, Voss said, those are still the terms. On the Resolute the bridge was quiet. Briggs watched the sensor display. The Hegemony flagship sat dead in the corridor, engines offline, surrounded on every bearing by human ships that weren't moving. Nowhere for it to go. Everyone on both sides understood that. All that was left was how it ended. Kareth's voice came back after a long pause. If I agree and you escort my fleet out, what stops you from following? You have the numbers. You could press this. Nothing stops us. Voss said, we don't want your space, we want you out of ours. Vreth had not moved from behind Kareth since the battle went quiet. When the silence stretched after Voss's answer, he stepped forward and said quietly that the council would send another fleet eventually. Not now. The political fallout would take time, but eventually. These terms didn't end the problem. Kareth looked at the display. Human ships still. Platforms dark in the belt. Dale's perimeter at the corridor edge, not pressing. He had been on the winning side of this moment 12 times in his career. He knew exactly what surrounded defeat looked like. He worked through it out loud, not to Vreth, just to himself. The withdrawal, the prisoner release. He stopped on the third. A Hegemony fleet admiral recording a public statement on every frequency in the sector. Vreth waited. None of this degrades our military capability, Kareth said. None of it stops the Council from rebuilding. What it does is put this on record, for everyone watching. Vreth said nothing. He doesn't need us to stop, Kareth said quietly. He needs everyone else in the sector to see that we can be stopped. He turned around. Open me a recording channel. Vreth opened it. Kareth stood in front of the pickup on his own damaged bridge, emergency lighting on the panels behind him, hull integrity warning still cycling on the secondary screens. He gave his name, his rank, his fleet designation. He stated plainly that the Hegemony Armada had entered the Vera corridor on orders from the Hegemony Council with the intent to force human submission under threat of destruction. He stated that the engagement had gone against the Hegemony. He named each ceasefire term and confirmed acceptance of all three. He didn't look away from the pickup once. He spoke for 4 minutes. When he finished, he sent the file to Voss without adding anything else. Voss received it, confirmed receipt, and opened a fleet-wide channel. The jump inhibitors at the far end of the corridor powered down in sections, releasing a path out. 8 of Dale's ships moved into escort position alongside the Hegemony fleet and began guiding them toward the exit. Slowly, one group at a time, leaving room for the damaged ships to match speed. Kareth's flagship moved last. Low power the escort ships on either side. It cleared the corridor without incident. Voss watched it go. He stayed at the display until the fold space signature collapsed and the corridor was empty, then stood there a moment longer. Briggs came over. "Do you think they honor it?" he asked. Voss thought about it. "Some of it eventually." A pause, not because of the threat, because of the recording. Briggs waited. "The Council can disavow Kareth," Voss said. "Call it coerced, make him the problem, deal with it internally. They might even push another fleet in 5 years." He turned from the display. "But the sector already has the file. The terms were never really about the Hegemony." "Then who were they for?" Briggs asked. Voss looked at the empty corridor on the display. "Everyone else," he said. "The data bundle left the Vera relay station 4 hours after the Hegemony fleet cleared the corridor. It went out on the standard broadcast cycle the station ran every 12 hours. Trade data, navigation updates, diplomatic notices. Kareth's recording was in the diplomatic section, tagged as a verified military ceasefire statement. The battle sensor footage came with it as supporting documentation, standard procedure for any engagement ending in a formal agreement. From there it spread. Trade post to relay station to whoever was listening. Species who didn't talk to each other directly still paid attention to corridor events. The bundle reached 14 inhabited systems over the following 4 days. The Hegemony's public broadcast frequencies ran on a closed internal network. It took another 14 hours before a copy reached a civilian relay on a Hegemony colony World 6 systems from the corridor. It played on a public display board in a transit station for 2 hours before a government official had it taken down. 7,000 people had already seen it. On the Resolute, Briggs found Voss in the ship's small observation room off the main corridor, a narrow space with a reinforced viewport facing aft. Voss was standing at it with a cup of cold coffee. Briggs asked whether Voss thought the Hegemony Council would honor the terms, or whether this was the first move of something longer. Voss said probably neither. Briggs waited. "The recording was never for the Council," Voss said. "They'll handle Kareth however they need to, call it coerced, frame him as the problem, contain the fallout. They might push another fleet in a few years." He set the coffee down. "But the sector already has the file." He turned from the viewport. 11 species, he said. "That's how many the Hegemony absorbed before they came here. 10 of those 11 had no one in range, or no time, or nothing to send a signal with. The sector found out after the fact, once the Hegemony was already inside and the outcome was settled." He paused. The species watching now, deciding whether to align with the hegemony or accept their terms or just go quiet and hope. They watched a 340-ship armada walk into a corridor and not walk out. They heard Karath's own voice say exactly what the intent was. They have the sensor footage. Briggs thought about it. You wanted witnesses, he said. The hegemony's model runs on isolation, Voss said. They take species one at a time fast before anyone can respond. What keeps it working is the belief that resistance is pointless, that you take the terms when they arrive because there's no other option. He looked at Briggs. That's not true anymore. In the days that followed, diplomatic relays lit up between governments that hadn't communicated in years. 3 neutral species sent observers to the relay station to request full copies of the sensor record. 2 species in active negotiations with the hegemony suspended those talks without explanation. Human analysts monitoring hegemony internal traffic noted a sharp rise in encrypted signals between Fleet Command and the Council, starting within hours of the first civilian broadcast on the colony world. The content was never intercepted. The volume alone said enough. Karath's name came up frequently. Elsewhere, in 11 different intelligence services, analysts were going through the bridge footage from the Resolute frame by frame. They had found the moment, right before the channel to Karath opened, right before the platforms dropped their cloaks. The instant Voss gave the order and turned to face forward. They froze on his expression and ran it back, again and again. Not fear, not focus, not aggression. Something quieter. They wrote reports about it in 11 different languages, and every report asked the same question. When did he know? The ship log answered it when the file entered the sector diplomatic record as evidence. The timestamp was clear. 48 hours before the hegemony fleet arrived. The first approach signatures at the outer edge of the relay network. He had known before they got there. He filed his report. He walked his ship and said good morning to the crew by name. He slept both nights. The analysts filed their conclusions. The human captain had spent his whole career waiting for exactly this day. When it came, he wasn't surprised. He wasn't excited. He wasn't afraid. He just smiled and armed the fleet.